Billy and his mother kept their arms wrapped around each other as the parachute slowed their fall. The plane flew past in a spiraling descent, missing them by a few hundred feet. As the wind blew them in the opposite direction, Merlin grew smaller and eventually disappeared into the trees far away. Mom stifled a sob. Billy tightened his arms around her and whispered, "He said he wouldn't die, Mom. I believe him." She nodded. "I do too, honey. If I didn't, I don't know what I'd do." They stayed quiet for a few moments, but the reverie was cut short. The tree tops below rushed towards them, with spiny branches extending like claws. "Mom," Billy said, "it looks like we could, Mom," Billy said, "it looks like we could get scratched up. Close your eyes and pray." They both squeezed their eyes shut. Twigs lightly scratched Billy's arms, and bending branches emitted pops and groans. A strong tug from above, and a swinging sensation, signaled the end of their fall. Billy opened his eyes and looked around. Their parachute had entangled itself in the arms of two tall oak trees that grew side by side, and the two jumpers still clung to each other, bobbled in midair like a yo-yo. "Okay," Mom said. "This isn't good. How are we going to get down from here?" Billy scanned the area below. Nothing between him and the ground except for a few skinny limbs that were much too far away to reach safely. "I'd guess we're about 50 feet up, too high to jump, but if we can swing to my right towards the big tree over there, I might be able to catch the closest branch and drop the limb just below it. Then maybe I could pull you towards it." She clenched her teeth. "I see it. It looks dangerous. Do we have any choice?" "I guess not. Let's start swinging." At first they moved in the opposite directions, but within a few seconds they were rocking in sync. Their motions sent a cascade of leaves raining on their heads, the stubborn ones that hadn't yet succumbed to the cold weather. Something cracked above, but the branches held firm. Billy and his mom pulled and pushed through a fourth swing, then a fifth, drawing closer and closer to the protruding branch. They spun like a twirling pendulum, first clockwise until the parachute lines wound up, then counterclockwise. As the cracking grew louder, their next swing brought them within reach of the branch. Keeping a firm grip on Mom with his legs, Billy twisted and stretched with both arms extended. When his hand struck the branch, one slipped away, but he hung on with the other. "I got it." "You'll never make it unless you let me go." A loud pop sounded from above, and a dozen small cracks. She was right. He had to act quickly. "Okay, I'll drop to the limb, and you can swing back to me." He released the leg hold on his mother and yanked his body upward and grabbed the branch with both hands. Mom swung wildly in the other direction. Branches snapped her higher, and when she came back down, they gave way, sending her plummeting towards the ground. Billy could only watch as she alternately fell and popped with each snag of the parachute. Her legs swiped against small branches twice, but her head cleared all the deadly obstacles. She finally reached the bottom with a sickening thud. "Mom!" Still dangling from the branch, he peered down through the tangled mesh of woods. The parachute covered the area where she had landed, hiding her from view. "Mom, can you hear me? Are you all right?" No one answered. Billy gripped the branch once more. He had to get down. But how? The limb underneath was close, but not close enough. Dropping straight to it was possible, but if he missed, the next step was about another 50 feet away. Ground zero, probably zero chance of surviving. Yet what other choice did he have? He released the branch and dropped. When his shoes slapped against the limb, he bent his knees to absorb the shock, then straddled the limb and slid across the bark to the trunk. After taking a deep breath, he looked down. The trunk stretched to the forest floor, without more than a gall and a few knots in its tough skin. Hardly anything to grab with his hands or to use for foot support. Summoning a surge of adrenaline, he skinnied down the trunk. A sharp knot dug into his hand, sending a trickle of blood into his palm, but he ignored the pain. When his feet landed in the crunchy matted leaves, he lumbered to the parachute. Grabbing armfuls of line and fabric, he called, "Mom! Mom! Where are you?" Billy finally found her, lying face up, partially covered with leaves. He dropped to his knees next to her and set a hand on her cheek, warm under his cold fingers. "Mom, can you hear me?" She nodded, a tight wince wrinkling her face. "You're alive." A tear trickled down his cheek. "Thank God you're alive." She opened her eyes and whispered, "Your face is dirty, Billy." He smiled. "Mom, do you know where we are?" "Somewhere in the West Virginia mountains, but that's about the best I can do." "Can you get up?" She braced herself against the ground with both hands and pushed while Billy cradled the back of her head. She sat upright and stretched her neck to each side. "I feel awful." "Did you hit the ground? Do you think you might have a concussion?" "I'm not sure. I know my feet hit first, but I don't remember after that." She reached her hands forward. "Let's see if I can walk. We have to find the plane right away." "Right, the plane. How could I forget?" When he hoisted her to her feet, she tried to walk. On her first step, she lost balance and caught herself on Billy's hands and stood on one foot. "Ow!" Billy helped her return to a sitting position. She rolled up her pant leg, revealing a swollen ankle. "Do you think it's broken?" he asked. "I can't tell. I'd better not walk on it, just in case." Billy sat next to her. "Then how are we gonna find Dad?" "You'll have to hunt for him by yourself. I'd just slow you down." She pointed towards the place higher on the hill. "Help me get to the clearing, and I'll try to signal if anyone comes looking for us from the air." When you find your dad, then both of you can come back and find me." "You mean if he's still alive?" "He's alive. He has to be." As she massaged her ankle, Billy studied her serene face. She really believed. So shouldn't he believe too? And what about the Slayer's words? Was Dad really a good dragon? Just a few days ago, he would have sided with his father no matter what. But now, with his father scratching away his foundation like it was just a thin, ratty carpet, what should he believe? And why should he trust a 1,500-year-old prophecy, especially when it lived only in the memory of the one who relied it? I think it would be relayed it, but it says relied it. Especially when it lived only in the memory of the one who relied on it. Billy set his hands on his mother's and stroked it. His fingers tumbled over her cold skin. "Mom, do you really think that it's true? He looked real bad, you know." "I know, but I'm not ready to consider the alternatives." "Okay, then. What about Bonnie? If we know Dad's going to live, shouldn't I look for her first?" "You've got a point," she shrugged. "But I guess it doesn't really matter. We don't know which way to go in either case." "True." Billy looked downslope. Hundreds of various sized trees, both standing and fallen, populated the landscape, sparse enough to get a view of much of the mountainside. Everything looked the same in all directions. Tall, white and gray trunks, bare and skinny, with their shed leaves covering the ground as far as the eye could see. Although some of the leaves still held their autumn shape and yellow hue, most were flat and brown, creating a carpet that shifted with each gust of wind. The motions raised faint whispers and carried the mountain's sweet scent, a sweet woodsy aroma, clean and cold. I guess I'll just head downhill. Roads are usually at lower elevations. I saw one while floating down. Right. Your dad usually flies pretty close to a highway if he can, so it shouldn't be too far. Yeah. I don't know if anyone on the radio understood my call. Flagging down a passing car might be our best bet. Then you'd better get going, and hurry. It'll be getting dark soon. Alright, I'm gonna drink some tea. Such a nice kitty. Ooh. Emma needs to join us for these. Out on a lot of good story. Oh, I forgot to start a timer because I want to stream for about 2.5-ish hours. There we go. Walter loves the city's fall festival. Next to Christmas, it was the most fun day of the year. As was his custom, he arrived at the park early to help with setting up the Boy Scouts dunking booth. Being a high-ranking scout in the local troop, it was his duty to manage the festivities. It was also his pleasure. Where else could he play carnival banker and poke fun at various teachers who bravely volunteered to become the objects of ridicule and the victims of an icy dip in a big wash tub? But they knew the risks. Walter had assured them that there were enough volunteers to make each chilly turn on the dunking platform a short one. Walter grabbed one of the softballs out of the wicker basket and repeatedly tossed it a foot or two in the air, then caught it in the same hand. Each smack of leather on flesh stung a bit in the chilly late afternoon air, but it was a good sting, one that promised lots of fun. As usual, the city council had timed the festival to coincide with the approach of Thanksgiving. Long ago, the founders of the city designated a community feast 2 Fridays before the holiday. Nobody alive today knew the reason for the timing, but local legend told the story of an early settler who fell off his horse on this weekend, more than 100 years earlier. He slid into a deep pit, and for 6 days he sat at the bottom, eating nuts and berries that sympathetic chipmunks dropped in. Finally, a passing hunter noticed a gathering of chipmunks around the hole, and found the settler at the bottom, covered with berry stains, but very much alive. The town celebrated this weekend, the weekend of his rescue every year, hauling out a 3-foot-high bronze chipmunk and placing it at the park entrance for 6 days. Everyone patted it on the head as they passed by, or placed acorns at its feet, in memory of the friendly chipmunks that kept the poor settlers from starving long ago. This year, cold air dominated the weather, but not unusually cold for West Virginia in November. Just chilly enough to give the festival its late autumn flavor. Somehow, the sight of everyone bundled up made the evening more like a family get-together. Ladies in double thick sweaters and men in lined jackets strolled from booth to booth, sometimes attached glove in glove, and trailed by prancing children in their knitted ski caps, carrying corn dogs or half-eaten plumes of cotton candy. White puffs streamed out of red noses. Laughter became contagious, and people ate, talked, and played together late into the evening. Walter's enthusiasm this year, however, was tempered by the worries of the day. With this strange bat creature at school that morning, and with Billy's house burning down, people seemed on edge. Gossip buzzed around town. The police had interviewed Walter after the firefighters finished saving what was left of the house, and they talked to everyone at school who knew Billy. The police wanted to interview Dr. Whittier, but nobody knew where he was. Walter told them that Dr. Whittier had gone to the airport while his goons burned down the house. But the rumor mill said that there was no sign of him at the airport. Not only that, the Bannisters' plane had taken off without leaving a flight plan. Theories bounced around town, sounding like plots from bad detective novels. One had Dr. Whittier as a foreign spy who used a flying robot to snoop on kids, and when Billy stole it to take a joyride, Whittier burned down the house to scare the kid into giving it back. Another had Billy as a genius kid who had built a new kind of flying machine that resembled a bat, and Dr. Whittier as a government agent who was trying to steal the secrets for the military. But no one mentioned Bonnie. It seemed that nobody cared about her part in the story. Walter knew she had gone with the Bannisters, but he kept quiet about it. The police didn't ask. Besides, Billy kept acting so secretive. Why volunteer more information than he had to? Billy was his friend, and they trusted each other. In any case, Bonnie's foster parents wouldn't report her as missing if they didn't know where she was, would they? Would report her as missing if they didn't know where she was, wouldn't they? When Walter tossed the ball into the air again, another hand caught it. Smiling, Mr. Hamilton set the ball in Walter's palm. "I thought I would find you here." "Hi, Mr. Hamilton." Walter pointed at the booth. "Are you ready to take the plunge?" Mr. Hamilton shook his head, his brow creasing. "I regret that I will not be able to partake tonight." "What's the matter? Are you sick?" "No, Walter." Mr. Hamilton looked at the booth and sighed. "I know how much this activity means to you and your fellow scouts, but I feel I must ask you to come with me on an urgent matter." Walter tossed the softball back to its basket. Is it something about Billy? Do you have any news?" "Yes, I have news, a great deal of news, in fact, but I would like to speak to you in a more private area." Mr. Hamilton laid an arm around Walter's shoulder and began walking him towards the park entrance. When they found a secluded area, he stopped and looked at Walter, with his deeply set eyes shaded in the dimming light. "Can you come with me to the school?" Walter hesitated, sobered by Mr. Hamilton's frown. I guess so. What for?" "I think the police are on the wrong trail. Word has it that you know the Bannister family better than anyone. I need you to help me investigate." "It can't wait until tomorrow?" "No, there's more. I heard on the news that a plane was reported in trouble over the mountains, the same kind that Billy's father owns. The police believe it went down perhaps 10 or 20 kilometers east of the Elkins. A sheep farmer in a place called Sully heard the laboring motor and saw a smoke trail. Heat surged into Walter's ears. "What can we do? Can we go and help them search?" "Yes, but not yet." Mr. Hamilton touched a cell phone on his belt. "I'm waiting for a call from someone who will give us a more precise location. We can drive there and join the volunteer search team." He glanced around the park. "Are your parents here? Can you ask permission to go?" "They're coming later, probably still at home." Mr. Hamilton extended his hand, gesturing toward the park exit. "Then please, come with me and phone them from school. I must leave the cell line open for the call I'm expecting." Walter stared longingly at the booth, but only for a moment. He had already set everything up, and the other volunteers could work it without him. Billy needed his help. Sure, let's go. Alright, I'm going to drink some more tea, because this is pretty rough on your throat, believe it or not. Ugh. It's like, I don't know what it is, but like reading for so long on end is not easy on your throat at all. Oh, sorry, kitty. Whacked you with the cable. Alright. Bonnie opened her eyes and tried to see through a pile of brown, stale-smelling leaves. Dizziness and confusion washed through her brain. Lying prostrate, she mentally took inventory, checking each part of her body. Her lips held a damp leaf, and she spat it out, leaving an earthy taste on her tongue. Her arms were spread across the soft leaf mattress. Apparently, she had tried to stop her fall, but failed. Any pain? Yes. Her left wing ached. Her right knee complained of a stabbing throb, and both hands reported a burning sensation. Not too bad. Bonnie raised her head, lifting it out of the leaves. She squinted, gazing in a dreamlike trance at the forest and the mountain downslope that served as her bed. The sky had darkened. Thick clouds obscured the setting sun. Something in her brain prodded her. Get up, get going. But why? She turned her eyes upward, trying to roll back the events of the day, but the voice in her head interrupted. Run! Fly! The sound of rustling leaves shook her out of her trance. The Slayer! Billy trampled through leaves, making his way down a relatively easy slope. Mom was probably right. The highway shouldn't be too far away, but it seemed like a skinny gray ribbon when he saw it from the sky. Just before he left her using the notepad and a pencil he kept in his pant leg pocket, he had drawn a quick map of what he had seen while drifting down. All he could do now was try to head in the right direction and hope to hear the sounds of cars, or see the flicker of distant headlights when the darkness fell. Everything looked so different at ground level, but, as he mentioned to his mother, most highways pass through the mountains at the lowest points. A steady downward trek had to be the logical way to go. Although he found a hiker's trail earlier, it wasn't wise to follow a path that probably wound through the mountains to reach vistas for sightseers. Down was the smart direction. He had to ascend a hump from time to time, but he was always able to find a declining slope again. As he hustled, the mental torture was almost too much to bear. Did he have a father anymore? Would he be able to find his mother again? And what about Bonnie? What would the Slayer do to her? Did they even land safely? Like 100 hammers, doubt pounded his emotions, and through welling tears he hurried on and on. Bonnie burst out of the leaves and flew, crying in pain as she lifted herself off the ground. After flying horizontally only a few dozen feet or so, she fell again. The crackling sounds of footsteps drew closer. Bonnie searched every direction for a hiding place. There was only one chance, straight up. With every bit of strength she had left, she beat her wings and flung herself into the air. She grabbed a low branch, flapped again as she slung herself to the next branch above, then rested, breathlessly, waiting in the crook of the tree. The skinny trunk barely shielded her body, and she tried to restrain her panting gasps and any noise that might give her away. A rough voice rose from below. "That's right. In my office, the doctor sent the sword last week. It's in the panel I told you about." Seconds later, Dr. Whittier limped into view, hurrying across the slope as fast as his gimpy leg would allow, and talking on a phone while pushing through the leaves. Wait, hold on, I see something. As he stopped, Bonnie squeezed herself behind the trunk and peered around it, following her eyes as tightly as, folding in her wings as tightly as possible. The Slayer stood where she had first fallen. I think I found where she landed. It looks like she flew again. He looked at the compass in his hand. She's heading southeast, or at least was. He limped to a spot a few yards away. She landed a second time here. He scanned the area while keeping his phone to his ear. I don't see any disturbed leaves, so she must have flown away. He looked up. Bonnie tried to follow his gaze, alternately watching him and the trees. A few were still decorated with rusty leaves, making a confusing patchwork in the dimming light. The evergreens posed as the well-dressed sentinels of the winter, but all the others stood naked and shivering in the stiff cold wind. He kicked through the leaves again, and rotated in a complete 360 scan before speaking again. Get the sword and the book, and bring Randall and Jerry. Yes, Jerry will be at the airport. I don't care how long it takes. Just cruise the highway 33 until you see me at the side of the road. I'll get there eventually. My instincts tell me there's an injured dragon around here somewhere, and I'm going to find her. I'm going to drink some more. Alright. Walter extended the office phone to Mr. Hamilton, who stood with his flashlight aimed at the closet door, casting a bright beam into the otherwise dark room. My dad wants to talk to you. Mr. Hamilton took the phone. It's direct. Charles Hamilton here? Yes, I am the same. Carl Foley? You mean Crazy Carl Foley? Of course I remember you. My days at Oxford weren't that many years ago. You looked after my dear sick wife when I gave Elizabeth away in marriage. I'll never forget that. I remember now. Walter was absent when we had our unit on Heritage, but I should have guessed that this fine young man was your son. Mr. Hamilton listened for several seconds, and while rapidly nodding. Yes, we're doing some detective work. He's secure in my care. Yes, we will be in touch. He hung up the phone and smiled. Your father has approved. Good thing, Walter said, since I'm already here. Yes, quite. Walter squinted. Crazy Carl Foley? A discussion for another time. Mr. Hamilton curled a finger. Follow me. I want to show you something. As they walked towards the closet, Walter looked around. Since he had never been in trouble himself, he rarely visited the principal's office. The last time he was here, he was delivering papers for the teacher. But he had just zipped right in and out, not wanting to stick around and meet the man behind the strange rumors, the eccentric Dr. Whittier. Now, in the dimness, the eerie paintings and Gothic displays seemed to stare him down, looming much larger than reality. They walked into the roomy closet and stopped at a low table where a huge book lay open. Holding the flashlight with one hand, Mr. Hamilton ran a finger down a page filled with strange type. See this. It's a genealogy. Your father did a research project for me on family histories, so perhaps you've seen genealogies before. I have, Walter said, but I don't really understand them. Look here, Mr. Hamilton tapped the page. Bannister is the family name of Reginald, a man whom Arthur adopted. So, I'm sure that there are lots of Bannisters. Right you are, Walter. But I was searching to find any reason for Whittier's actions. You see, I divorced that our principal is not Whittier. His name is Devon. His Whittier character is a disguise. A disguise? How did you find that out? From his own books. Mr. Hamilton pulled another volume from the shelf, laid it next to the first one, and opened it to a marked page. You would have to understand how genealogies work, but he has placed the name Devon where his own name should go. Notice the handwriting and compare it to that of the original Sir Devon. They're the same. Yes, it's as if Whittier copied the script. I think he fancies himself a true knight, and he is very proud of his name. I knew beforehand that Sir Devon's first son was also named Devon, so it's no surprise that any descendant would have the same name even after so long. What's so special about Devon? Mr. Hamilton stared toward the dark ceiling. Sir Devon was a knight, very close to King Arthur, but the two had a bit of a falling out. He looked again at Walter. Nobody knows why they argued. I think it's because Devon was barred from the king's inner circle. He never had a seat at the round table. But legends say the strife was over Devon's rabid interest in killing dragons. Supposedly, Arthur thought him mad and sent him away. But in either case, ever since that time, Devon's family has had a cruel interest in making life miserable for any of Arthur's descendants. They made the Christian name into a surname as a threat to Arthur's family. So Billy's descended from King Arthur, and Dr. Whittier, Devon, has it in for him and his father. Precisely. And not only that, legend tells us that Arthur will return someday to rule once again. My own theory is that his return will be in spirit, in the form of one of his descendants, not necessarily to rule, but rule or no. It is a return that Devon and his ilk would surely oppose. Perhaps William, a doorknob rattled, making them jump. Mr. Hamilton silently closed the books, flicked off his flashlight, and pulled Walter deeper into the closet, sliding to the side of a bookshelf near the back. The office light flashed on. Then the closest closet's fluorescent bulbs flickered to life. A relatively short man entered, wearing a dark trench coat. He appeared to be stocky, though not obese. The man pulled books from a standalone shelf, one by one, with small, nimble hands, reading each title before pushing the book back in place. Finally, he pulled out an old metal box that had been set vertically on the shelf as though it were a book. He fished a key from his pocket, unlocked the box, and opened its creaky lid. Then, moving slowly, he withdrew a book from the box and smiled in a relieved sort of way. The book was old and worn, smaller than the huge journals that weighed down the bookshelves. Its ornate cover gave the impression of royal significance, and the man's reverent handling proved that it had to be valuable. He set it carefully back in the box, before placing the box in his trench coat pocket. Now wielding a pocket knife, he used the blade to pry a panel loose on the bookshelf's side. When the panel came off, the gap exposed a narrow inset space, maybe 4 inches deep. From the space, the man withdrew a scabbard and gazed at it. Mr. Hamilton stifled a gasp. Walter cringed, thinking they would get caught, but it seemed that the man didn't hear the sound. Holding the sword's hilt, He slowly pulled out a shiny silver blade and admired it, smiling broadly at the beautiful shimmering weapon, etched on both sides with strange markings. After a few seconds, he returned the sword to its scabbard, hid it under his coat, and fastened the buttons in front. He then reached into his pocket, pulled out a phone, and punched a number. When a tinny voice emanated from the phone, the man patted his coat, looking pleased with himself. "I have the sword. The host will soon triumph." Alright, we're almost done, it looks like, with the chapter. I'm really tired, though. I think I'll probably call it quits at the end of this chapter. No, it's not quite as long as I would have liked, but I'm really tired. Didn't sleep very much last night. Didn't get a good nap today either, so I should probably get to sleep earlier-ish. Let's see. The Slayer moved on, and the sound of his feet scattering leaves faded in the distance. Bonnie leaned out from behind the tree and gazed in the direction he had walked. His departure didn't appear to be a ruse to draw her out of hiding. Unfortunately, since he was heading for the road, she would have to go in the same direction and risk the chance of being seen. But what other choice did she have? Too exhausted to climb, she spread her wings, jumped, and tried to sail to a soft landing. Her weak wing gave way, and she hit the ground chest first, with a hard thump, banging her knee again, and taking another mouthful of leaves. She coughed and gasped, fighting to catch her breath while pushing up from the wound as wooziness flooded her head. Finally, air flowed more freely, and a rush of blood charged in to settle the dizzy sensation. She pushed back to a sitting position and breathed, sniffing as she tried to suppress her tears. It was no use. A pitiful sob erupted. A powerful slayer was chasing her. She was seriously wounded. Her friends were surely dead, and worst of all, she was alone. Alone and far from a home that didn't even care. Alright, that concludes chapter 13. Now we are on chapter 14. And pretty much half of the way through the book. This is the red portion. So yep, basically halfway through the book. Alright, I'm going to have to stop there. But it's been fun, and I'll see you guys next time. Next time we should be able to do a longer stream. So that'll be good. Alright, bye.